The morning rain drizzled softly against the glass windows of the tiny cafe, painting the world outside in blurred silver streaks while the aroma of fresh coffee and baked bread floated through the air like a gentle memory. Inside, Emily moved quietly between tables, her worn shoes making barely a sound against the wooden floor, her smile faint but sincere, the kind that hides 1,000 sleepless nights and unspoken worries. Her hair, tied loosely behind her head, shimmered with a few stray drops of rain, and her apron bore the faint marks of a long week, yet her eyes held the calm glow of someone who still believed in kindness. Every cup she served, every plate she placed, carried a quiet grace, the sort that cannot be taught, only born from love and struggle. Outside, cars hissed through puddles, people hurried beneath umbrellas, but inside that small cafe, time seemed to slow down, until the door opened, the bell above it chiming gently, and a boy in a wheelchair was rolled in by his caretaker. The boy, no more than 8 or 9, had gentle brown eyes that seemed lost between silence and sadness, his head tilted slightly to the side, hands trembling faintly, his gaze uncertain. Other customers glanced over briefly, then turned away, some out of discomfort, others out of indifference, as if his presence reminded them of a world they didn't want to see. Emily, noticing the awkward pause that had settled over the room, stepped forward with the same softness she reserved for the most fragile things in life. She knelt beside the boy, lowering herself until her eyes met his, her voice a whisper of sunlight through the rain. "Hey there," she said softly, though the boy didn't answer. She smiled anyway. "Are you hungry?" The caretaker nodded with a tired expression, explaining that the boy had trouble feeding himself. Emily took the tray, set it down, and gently began to help him, spoon by spoon, patient and unhurried, as if this small act were the most important thing in the world. The cafe grew quieter, the rain outside grew louder, and in that quiet symphony of ordinary life, something extraordinary unfolded. At a corner table, half hidden behind the flicker of a laptop screen and the rim of a coffee cup, a man watched. His name was Richard Hale, a man whose face often appeared in newspapers beside numbers, skyscrapers, and success. His suit was immaculate, his watch gleamed under the cafe's dim light, and yet his eyes looked hollow, the kind of emptiness that comes not from poverty but from too much wealth and too little love. He had brought his son here today not for company, but out of obligation, as if fulfilling a duty that love no longer guided. But now, as he watched this humble waitress kneel before his child, her hands steady, her voice kind, his heart, long silent and sealed behind years of business meetings and empty mansions, began to stir. There was something in the way she looked at his son, not with pity, but with recognition, as if she saw the boy for who he was, not what he had lost. The light from the window spilled across her face, catching her in a halo of soft gold, and for the first time in years, Richard felt the fragile ache of humanity inside him. He couldn't look away. The world outside rumbled on, cars, phones, deadlines, but in that tiny cafe, in the space between one spoon and the next, a connection formed, silent yet powerful, like the first crack of sunlight after a long storm. Emily smiled again, the boy's lips curled faintly upward in response, and Richard Hale, billionaire and widower, realized that he was witnessing something priceless, not an act of charity, but of love so pure it made him question everything he thought mattered. And as he sat there, his untouched coffee cooling beside him, he felt something warm and unfamiliar rise in his chest, something he hadn't felt since his wife died. Hope days passed, but Richard Hale could not shake the image of the young waitress kneeling beside his son, her hands steady, her eyes warm. He returned to the cafe under the excuse of routine, though deep inside he knew it was not coffee he sought, but the quiet grace that surrounded her like a whisper of mercy. Each visit felt like peeling back layers of a forgotten self, the father he once was, the man his late wife had loved, the part of him that still longed to understand his own child. Emily never treated him as anything more than another customer, unaware of the empire he owned, unaware that the man in the corner had the power to buy the very building she worked in. What she did notice, however, was the boy's faint smile each time he saw her, the way his trembling hands reached for the spoon she held. Her voice, soft as the hum of the rain outside, drew laughter from the child, a sound so rare it startled Richard the first time he heard it. That laughter, fragile yet alive, echoed in his mind long after they had left the cafe. One evening, he stood before his vast office window, the city lights stretching endlessly below, yet all he could see was the waitress's gentle smile and his son's joy. Wealth had filled his world with everything except meaning, and for the first time, he realized how empty his fortune truly was. When Emily lost her job a week later, the cafe shutting down under financial strain, she walked home beneath a gray sky, clutching a small box of her belongings, her heart heavy but her spirit unbroken. Meanwhile, in his mansion of marble and silence, Richard sat beside his son and noticed Oliver's sad eyes staring at the door as if waiting for someone who would never come. That night, Richard made a decision that would alter all their lives. The next morning, Emily awoke to a soft knock on her apartment door. Standing there, dressed not in his usual armor of wealth but in humility, was Richard Hale. He explained who he was, not the billionaire from the newspapers, but the father of the boy she had cared for with such tenderness. He asked her to help him connect with his son, to teach him what kindness had taught her. Hesitant at first, Emily agreed, and soon her days were spent in the mansion's sunlit garden and quiet halls, where laughter slowly began to echo again. Under her guidance, Richard learned not how to manage his son, but how to love him. He learned that healing begins not with money but with presence, the simple act of being there, hand in hand, word by word. One afternoon, as golden light streamed through the window, Oliver looked up, eyes shining, and whispered the word that shattered years of silence, "Dad." Tears filled Richard's eyes, the world seemed to stop. Emily turned away to hide her own tears, but the moment bound them all in something deeper than gratitude, it was redemption. Weeks later, when Emily discovered her mother's medical debts had been mysteriously paid, she confronted Richard, only for him to smile softly and say, "You didn't just feed my son. You fed my soul." From that day, Emily became more than a caregiver, she became part of their family. The once cold mansion transformed into a home filled with laughter, warmth, and light. On a quiet evening months later, Oliver stood for the first time during therapy, his small hand gripping Emily's fingers, his father standing beside them with tears glistening in his eyes. As the boy took a trembling step forward, Richard whispered, almost to himself, "Because of you, we're a family again." And in that golden hour, beneath the soft hum of wind through the trees, three hearts that had once lived in separate worlds finally found their way home, not through power or wealth, but through the simple, extraordinary miracle of kindness.